better. My wife was very, very nervous when I began exploring psychedelics. And she kept saying, I'm afraid you're going to leave me. I'm afraid you're going to leave me. How right she was. Where he says, an addict is someone for whom spirituality is a necessity rather than a luxury. So do you see yourself as an addict today?
I'm an addict. I'll always be an addict. Not of porn, just I'm an addict.
You're not anything. You're not an escape artist. You're not an addict. You're not any of those things. What you are is someone who's choosing to follow a certain modality of liberation.
Come across your content within the last few weeks, and it was like the perfect timing for like where I was at in life and the different, a lot of chaos and a lot of uncertainty and a lot of madness. And you somehow, if we believe in Hashgacha Pratis, slid into my algorithm. And I'm not sure how to interpret that other than I'm supposed to pay attention. So I had a interesting opening.
Can you share what it's meant for you? I'm just curious because it's really in the last 2 months that I'm doing it very aggressively. Like I'm all in the last 2 months. I was doing it kind of on the side. Now it's sometimes it'll consume my whole day. And being that I don't charge and I don't get paid, this is kind of the currency that I trade in, the currency of impact.
Right.
So can you explain what you mean? Like when you say that it came to you at the right time, what is that? What did it do for you, and what do you mean by that? I know you're going to be asking me questions, but I was just hoping to sneak one in.
I mean, I always have a trouble telling a story. Where do I start the story? Where like what part of the process do I have to start at? I can start when I'm 12. I can start when I'm in the last 2 months. So for me, in the last year, I don't know, like had physical health issues, anxiety health issues, started school, quit school, starting up school again, looking for work, looking for jobs. And in the midst of all that chaos, one of my comforts is pornography. And I wouldn't say it's one of my comforts. It's a go-to tool for many different reasons. Like you've described how you use it because you need to get out of your mind. Like you need to stop feeling your feelings. You came to this awareness that I do not want to feel my feelings. And for me, I'm somebody who I know I want nothing more than to feel my feelings, but it seems to be whatever I'm feeling is inappropriate or is just have less feelings mental. I'm a very emotional, very passionate, very open human being, and coming through this process of getting to the point where I'm okay with like who I am, like this, over a few weeks, this awareness of like, I am okay. I will be okay. I'm okay. I will be okay. And I think the first podcast I saw of yours was actually on ayahuasca with Omar Pinto. You have two Omars in your life. So Omar Pinto. Yes. And okay, it was titled AA and Ayahuasca, the road to recovery.
From Alcoholics Anonymous to
ayahuasca.
No, Omar shares his journey of 17 years sober,
right?
Steps, and then finding ayahuasca.
And I've had this paradigm of I'm not an addict. I'm an escape artist because I don't have a vice of choice. For me, I'm aware of my desire to escape, and I've never it's not porn, it's not weed, it's not alcohol, it's not TV, it's not Instagram, it's none of those things. It's an overarching desire to escape. And then I think through...
How do you juxtapose that with feeling your feelings or wanting to feel your feelings?
Because what I wrote down in response to you not wanting to feel your feelings, I want to feel my feelings, and my thoughts are the things that I have to kind of escape from. And porn and sex is the thing that gets my mind to turn off, like the rational part of my brain to turn off.
Right.
And
one way I've described it is that porn quieted the noise for me. It just felt like it was so busy up here, and porn or other variations of it, strip clubs, etc., just quieted all the noise. I felt like I could think about one thing.
Yeah, and I've gotten to this point where I many times, right? Like as a 14-year-old or a 12-year-old sneaking watching porn on my computer, and then my dad coming to me and me knowing what the conversation was going to be before he told me. Like, I knew what I got caught doing before I ever got caught doing it, like, because and I knew that he had spyware on my computer. And like at 12 years old, he comes to me, do you know what addiction is? Like, he actually opened up the conversation as addiction. And I remember sitting in the car with him. Pittsburgh.
Pittsburgh, okay.
Yeah. Chabad community, Pittsburgh. Parents of,
my wife did as well.
Yeah. So your wife's mother was my sister's, I think, midwife at her birth. Like she, yeah. So, and close friends with my mother, and yeah. So
beautiful.
It was this evolution of, I'm not an addict, and I've almost had this aversion to ever becoming an addict, and I've always been able to take breaks whenever I need to take breaks in order to not feel like an addict. I've always been able to, but really just switching hands. And I think my drug of choice that I felt that I was told was wrong as a kid was weed. And I had this insistence to prove everybody wrong, that no, it's not a bad drug. It's not inherently bad. And I've always had this insistence to prove wrong. But I guess I went off the derech for like 5 years, from 12 to 18 years old. And then yeshiva, where I came to this realization, where it was shown to me that I didn't have a problem with God or Judaism. I just had a problem with the Jews who were teaching me about him. And my experience going through school was like, the way I put it is like, I don't have a problem with God. I'm just an anti-Semite. Meaning I just don't like some Jews. But at a certain point, I've never kept my porn a secret until I got into marriage. And I remember I got married at 20. So I got married young. After 3 years of yeshiva, got married to the girl I wanted to marry. And I remember the one rule that I was told is never let your wife find out. Never let your wife find out.
Who told you this rule?
Somebody, someone who's still one of the most influential people in my life. But it was, I remember.
As a warning or as an example?
As a warning. Oh no, he's an example of who I'd like to be like, or not to be like. He's one of my rebbes, like people who, as far as thinking and ability to share the beauty of Torah, is the person who communicated that to me.
So he's an example in many ways, but in this one he was a warning.
Very much. And I remember noticing that
kudos to be able to separate.
Yeah, it took a while.
Oftentimes we want to put these people on pedestals, and they know everything and they have all the answers and they're amazing. And then we find one flaw and we throw them in the ground and we say they're a waste of time, these people. So kudos to be able to respect him for his Torah learning and recognize that the advice on your wife not finding out was pretty poor relationship advice.
It was pretty poor, and it took until like 2 years ago. We're married for almost 7 years. Took up like 3 years. Like, I think for the first 5 years of our relationship, first off, our sex life had its issues, just technically. Then all the challenges and the therapists and my cleanness from porn and abstinence from porn lasting a certain period of time, and then just eventually stopping and going back to it, and then becoming overwhelmingly aware of the walls that I was putting up around myself in order to make sure that she didn't know, right? And to hide this element of myself. And then the fears of if this element of myself, which is a deep part of myself, is ever revealed, the whole relationship would just disappear. And I eventually got to this point where with the therapist, he's like, like maybe you should just like let your wife know, like it's normal. And everybody would always tell me it's normal. Don't worry about it. And I'm like, well, I don't care that it's normal. Like, it doesn't do well with me. And I seem to have an overwhelming inability to stop myself from doing it. I could stop for a week. I could stop for a month. And yeah, I've always, and the people I've always found myself being connected with are extremely creative people and people who suffer from addiction, or very tormented people. Those are I just have a way of walking into a room, kind of like a a sexual abuser can walk into a room and see who he could abuse. I could walk into a room and see who like I could connect with and relate with and share with and there's parts of me that almost I have struggled with lots of self-doubt and negative views of myself, and porn actually almost seems like for me a defense mechanism. Like it convince it proves to me that I'm inadequate. It proves to me that I'm not capable. It proves to me that I'm not worthy. And
but it's also the reason to go there. Meaning the inadequacy is also the reason to go there, right? They kind of build off each other. Yeah, it's hard to know what started first.
Yeah, and I still don't know what started first, and what starts first. And I don't know. In the last few weeks, I've been clean in a way that I've been clean for that I haven't been clean ever before.
So do you see yourself as an addict today?
I'm an addict. I'll always be an addict, not of porn, just I'm an addict. And there's a, I don't know, and I relate with the addict, and I think the addict in me is the best part of me, and I'm the sensitive soul. I'm the soul of chaos. I'm the soul of, I am more in tune with suffering, so I experience suffering more, and I can help heal people suffering more, and I can make people feel comfortable, and I'm open and I'm vulnerable, and like just, but I've always been kind of reserved, and you gave me this like kick in the ass, kind of like stop being so reserved about it. Like it was really honestly that a quote that wasn't yours, but you brought up with faith, that you don't need to be perfect in order to inspire others. Let others be inspired by your imperfection. It just like that wiring switched. Just that clicked so much for me. So I have to say thank you for having that conversation.
Within Chabad, if I had to say the single most detrimental aspect or teaching or like foundational building block of our belief system, is that we should aspire to be perfect. And I think it starts with it starts with the way we view the Rebbe, in fact. And getting to know him as I was older, understanding that he had a brother who wasn't from, fights with his nephew. Like we spoke about the books, the story, and Hey Tavis, and they won the books. But to understand that this was an interfamilial dispute, something that if any of us would go through, we recognize a level of struggle in our lives, right? If there was a family dispute that we were a part of, or our family was in dispute, we would recognize something that we were working on. And the suggestion always, at least the way it was taught to me, it seemed like this perfect being who was always perfect, will always be perfect, and then set us up to find role models who are also pretending to be perfect. And this whole idea of perfection, when you peeled it back, the Rebbe was someone who struggled in many ways, maybe not the way, even as I'm saying this, I want to qualify because I know like all the programming, the way I heard about him, but the fact that he didn't have children was a source of pain for him. That's not perfect. If someone is experiencing something that's a source of pain in their life, there's a struggle. The fact that he had to pretend to be his brother while he was communicating with his mother. He had to run away from the Nazis. He didn't magically make them disappear the way it was communicated, that we just line up to him and he just makes all of our problems disappear and here's a perfect being. And I think if we had communicated more of that struggle, it would have been a lot easier for us, our teachers and everyone else, to accept a level of imperfection. What's impressive about the Rebbe is what he did despite everything else. That's what's impressive, despite the fact that he was human. That's what's impressive. And I think it kind of filters down through there, and then all of us are trying to pretend, hey, we're each more perfect than the next. That's one of the main reasons I speak. It's just like, hey, let's stop. Let's stop with this craziness of pretending everyone has it figured out. Everyone knows the answers. And then someone getting up to speak can only speak if he has the answers. So I'm glad that you were inspired by that. I'm not speaking because I have the answers. I'm speaking because I have the questions. Right. And there's
it's just seeking better and better questions. Like to me, like the the pursuit is of better questions. That has always been the Jewish pursuit, is better and better questions, and every answer
And
is
to
a
be
form
honest
of
in the
death.
process.
Yeah. And I remember
every answer form of death.
Because it ends a road. It's just like, okay, great. I believe in God now. I know God, right? Because you gave me an answer. Oh, he exists. Or I believe in the Rebbe. The Rebbe said it. So there's your answer. And I was rather disillusioned at a very young age because I didn't fit in. From second, as early as first grade, as early as second grade, I was a bad student, a bad kid. And my grades were Gimmels and Daleds, right? D's and F's in Judaic studies and A's and B's in secular studies. And at around sixth grade, I noticed that pattern, and I came to think maybe this isn't for me. And then my parents are Baal Teshuvas, so it was this ability, like, how can you, you got to choose this, like I want to believe, but the fact that I don't, there was actually a source of maybe shame or inadequate, but eventually I'm like, no, it's just not for me. And I wrote it off. And I had my high school was actually the best. I got to leave home and go to a modern Orthodox day school. And it was the best thing that ever happened. Yeah. It took until I was about 14 years old for my parents to be like, shit, maybe this isn't working. And, we would prefer maybe our kid's not the problem. Maybe he's in the wrong institution, in the wrong framework. And let's see what happens if we just let him flee the nest a little bit. And thank God that happened.
Kudos to your parents for putting you before religion. Many parents don't. And I am very grateful for that it happened when it did. And there's obviously the resentments that come from it not happening earlier, but then the ability to empathize that, okay, they were Baal Teshuvas who were thrown into a perfect system with perfect, Are you the oldest?
I'm the fourth of five, so no.
Are you the first one who was struggling in the way you were?
My older brother, Zalman, above me, he paved the road for me. He didn't get the benefit of them taking the foot off the gas as early as I did.
Right, so I was going to say it's early, but now that you say that there was an older sibling, I understand it.
Yeah.
14 is early, so you...
Yeah, and I became independent, and I was no longer just inadequate. I was capable of. I lived in somebody's house. I got to choose when to study, when to work out, when to hang out with friends, when to come home. It was all up to me. When to do my laundry, it was all up to me, and it gave me a source of independence. And obviously, I used so another thing that was pointed out in your interviews was with faith was a love addiction, and I'd always. Have you ever read Eric Fromm's book, The Art of Loving?
I don't think so, no.
It's an absolute necessity, but he has this line: the awareness of human separation without reunion by love is the source of shame. It is at the same time the source of guilt and anxiety. And he draws it back. He starts off his book with Gan Eden, the moment we ate from the Eitz Hadas Tov V'Ra, and we became aware of our separateness from one another, and we were naked and ashamed, right? And this awareness of our nakedness comes from as a consequence of our awareness of other. And the moment we're aware of other, we're now vulnerable to being hurt and vulnerable to being attacked, and we have rejected. We're aware of death. We're aware of all of our insecurities and all of our failures and weaknesses in relation to other. And his prescription is what we do. We have all of these attempts at dulling that awareness of separateness. So we could do that by becoming a member of a group and becoming part of the herd and getting safety that way. Or we could do drugs that make the outside world disappear, and the only thing that exists is me, or do drugs that I cease to exist. And and then he goes into drugs like ayahuasca and this. I mean, he was writing in the 50s, but how different cultures have managed to create different systems of having, he calls them orgiastic experiences or orgiastic activities, where you can create a sense of oneness and togetherness between everybody. So whether that's drinking alcohol in a social setting where like we bond, or it's Indians dancing around a bonfire. And
he sees this as something positive or something negative, these orgiastic experiences?
so he said to the degree of which it's accepted in culture and society and it actually works, it would be it, he says with alcohol and drugs, it what ends up happening is you have that sense of oneness, but then the sense of shame and guilt and anxiety that come afterwards are that brought you to that need to drink are exponentially developed, and you need to go. So if you live in a society where there's no shame and it's an integrated part of society, your alcohol might not be the biggest issue in the world. But if it's something that's alienating you from society and making you further away from people, it's going to further the the source of all human anxiety, which is the awareness of your separateness. And so his prescription is
And the irony
love.
is that likely if you experience alcohol in that way, where it gives you a sense of belonging while you have it, but then a sense of shame afterwards, then you're likely to use alcohol again, creating that cycle more and more and more. Whereas if you use alcohol and you get that experience, and then afterwards you don't have the negative side effects, then you don't need to go back to alcohol. You do it every so often, but you don't need to go back to it. So it's actually what creates the unhealthy relationship. I hear.
Right. So a question I had for you is like you had said on Valuetainment with Patrick Bet-David, and you had said that if porn works for you, like, okay, great, like it just didn't work for me. And my question is, is there any context in which porn just works? Like if we let go of the shame and guilt surrounding porn, would porn all of a sudden become fine and we should just normalize porn? Like,
I'll explain my point over there. My point was that I'm not coming from a place of being an anti-porn advocate. So in that interview, Patrick was asking me questions about porn itself. Like, what's my opinion of porn? And I said, I have no opinion for society. I may have, as far as, like, personally, I have an opinion about a lot of things maybe I shouldn't have opinions about just because we walk down the street and we form opinions. But my opinion of porn is my own experience of being trapped in it and not being comfortable to ask anyone for help because of the shame associated with it. So when I get up and speak publicly, I am speaking to people who have already made the decision that porn is not for them. And they want out, but they don't feel safe enough to tell this to another human being. So I say, I'll do it. I'll do it first, and I'll stand behind a microphone. I'll stand up on a stage. I'll be at a social gathering, and I'll just mention the fact that I was dependent on porn. And I'm talking, and I'm looking to reach out to those people who are struggling the way I was, to make a moral statement about porn in any and all situations. I can't. But let's say certain things about porn, which I could say. But this is not about all porn. A lot of the porn that people are consuming, I do have strong opinions on, because they're made in immoral ways. They feed an immoral system. They take advantage of people. They use people. Many people are lied to. They think they're filming something else, and they're manipulated into what they end up doing, or they think the porn is going to be viewed in one country where it won't affect them, and they end up signing a contract that allows them to use it everywhere. So you're feeding a system that is unhealthy, and as much as that porn is unhealthy, it's unhealthy. But suppose a couple decided to film themselves having sex, and they share this with a few of their friends. Do I have the same view of that porn as I have of everything else? Maybe we wouldn't use the word porn for that experience. Mm-hmm. So I'm not here to talk about porn across the board. I didn't analyze it. I didn't study it. It's in some ways, it's not my business. As soon as I realized it wasn't for me, let me give you an analogy because you seem a little perplexed. Say alcohol. There are some people who believe alcohol is poison. In any and all forms, alcohol is poison. I know people who believe this. Alcohol is straight up poison. It's poison for your body, and they'll give you the science behind it, how it destroys your liver and how it's not healthy for anything, and the way it consumes you and your brain, your body, and everything associated with it. They call it so one person told me that alcohol comes from the words alcohol, which is a spirit of delusion or a spirit of something, some sort of like referencing. In other words, it's always negative. Other people say, I drank too much alcohol. I joined Alcoholics Anonymous because it wasn't working for me. And let me share my experience from there. So to ask that guy what he thinks about alcohol, whether it's poison for everybody, I don't know. Maybe it's great in some cases. I have no clue. I know for me it was detrimental, and there's millions, if not tens of millions, if not hundreds of millions of people who have already made the decision that porn is bad for them, and they can't get out of it. So let me just talk to them. Why do I have to worry about the people who are on the fence about it? If you're on the fence, God bless. There's so many people, like you're talking about, you've made the decision. You no longer want to use porn. It's unhealthy for you. You've tried to stop. You have a few weeks sober. So let me talk to you and let me see how I can help you get to a few months sober, a few years sober, maybe a few decades sober. Isn't you where I should pour my energy into, or should I try to convince someone who's not sure? Why would I do that?
Right. You don't have to convince.
So that was my point.
Yeah.
That was my point on it.
My personal experience, and then experience from talking to just being open about it for years, like, and being able, like, just blatantly, whether it's to my rabbi or to anybody, like, with the fear that I'll never become perfect because I don't see myself ever. And it wasn't just porn. It was sex. It was like, meaning the desire for sex, my sex drive, like, and also this acute awareness of that, like, putting up blockers and just stopping the behavior wasn't going to solve the issue. There was a need to find out what, I guess, growing up Chabad, the idea of Zel umazeh bara Elokim, like this and its opposite, God created. So there's no such thing as a Yetzer Hara or a Yetzer Tov, an evil inclination or a good inclination. There's just this thing called drive, will, and it could be expressed in two ways. So if I am running to porn, or I'm running to TV, or I'm running to anything that allows me to quiet, like, there's something that isn't being expressed that needs to be expressed, and I need to figure out what that is. And until I figure out what that is, there's really no point in just stopping. That was kind of my attitude for a long time. And
if I can correct one thing, that oftentimes we don't figure it out in the way like we figure with our mind. It's what you're doing now is a form of expression, and different writing you do is a form of expression, and that may be the energy that needs to come out. And you're more likely to figure it out by playing with random tools of expression, whether it's painting, podcasting, journaling, speaking, dancing, than you are figuring.
Right. Yeah. So the name of my podcast is Thinking Aloud, which is it's this space where I'm just thinking out loud. These aren't my thoughts per se. I don't believe this per se. Like, I mean, it's not. It's a respectful place for us to explore our thoughts, and this belief that by communicating, by sharing, by almost playing ping pong with, like, a conversation, passing the ball back and forth, being open, like, is, like, it's in that space where I'm most creative, where I'm most open. And for me, what I've realized, like, explicitly, it's, I journal, so I get to look back at my journal, and I get to see where I haven't been writing, where I have been writing, and the exact same time of year, the same issues popping up. I just need to do this. I just need to do that. I just need to work out. I just need to stop watching porn, and I just need to, like, and everything will be okay. And I could look back at my good times and see my behaviors about my good times, and I could look at my bad times and I could see the behaviors I was participating in my bad times. But I was listening to, you've heard of Joey Rosenfeld?
Yeah, I think he and I will speak soon.
He's
I reached out to him recently.
So a year ago is when I came across him, and that started, like, that's where, I don't know where the clarity came from, but it started then. And then existentialist philosophers also, but he has this line where it's like the soul of an addict, or the addicted soul, is one that contains within itself vast storehouses of intensity and desire. It is for this reason that the process out of addiction towards recovery offers gifts that could never have been realized without addiction. In this sense, addiction will be seen as a profoundly difficult condition that can give birth to an equally, if not more, profound sense of spiritual sensitivity and experience. And like that spoke to me, and it's like I am an addict, and the ultimate desire is to be creative and to be recognized, to be, and the fear of being creative is that I'm going to be creative and I'll put something out into the world, and it's going to get judged and recognized incorrectly or belittled or not recognized for what it is. It's going to fall on deaf ears. Like because what creativity
is there a better metaphor for a creative expression falling on deaf ears than masturbation?
There is none. I laugh with my wife.
Are you literally doing it?
Yeah, literally.
You literally do.
You're
doing it.
Instead of you're spilling your creative juices as they would be put. And
so what are you worried about? That it's going to do nothing and you're going to get judged. So you take your creative forces, you do nothing with them, right? You spill it out. Mm-hmm. It's the same energy, right? That's what he's saying. You do nothing with them, and then you judge yourself. You got exactly what you asked for. Exactly. What you feared. It's happening anyway.
Yeah.
So you may as well do this. And then you definitely created something.
Straight up.
And someone else may be judging, but at least you're not.
Right. And I'm still going to be judging, and I am sensitive, and I do care about what other people think. And people saying, oh, just stop caring about what other people think, that never spoke to me, because I do care what people think and feel. And I do care how what I say is received by them. And it does matter to me that I speak effectively and I communicate effectively. So can I help you with that? Yeah, please.
Okay. So you say you care about what people think, right? Some people are saying you shouldn't care about what people think. So some people who you care about what they think don't think. They just have opinions. They don't think. So I also care about what people think. You know which people? The people I care about. So there are probably about 5 or 10 people, not I care about what they think, I actively solicit what they think. Right? There are people we call for feedback. Literally, we call them for feedback. And we say, hey, can you tell me what you think about this? Can you watch this and let me know? Or if there's enough people saying something similar, then hey, I'll pay attention. But I don't care about what anyone thinks, because half of them aren't thinking.
Yeah, and even if they are, it doesn't. Right, so that was.
We can care without getting lost in every person's opinion or half-baked opinion.
Right. But the need for feedback, like it is a need for feedback, and without feedback, we go insane.
Same thing, directed. It's the same thing with the sexual drive. There's nothing wrong with it. It's a beautiful thing. It's creativity. When I started my recovery process, I shut down my sexual energy completely. I was afraid of my sex drive. I was afraid that if I allowed even a thought to come up, I was going to derail, because it took me to dark places. Porn and strip clubs and prostitutes, I was way off the deep end with it. And it never seemed to stop. It just more and more and more and more and more, because it wasn't being fed, it wasn't doing anything. So I shut it off. When I shut it off, I was sober, but I was also sad. I also had no motivation, or less motivation. I didn't feel creative. I didn't feel energized. I didn't feel playful. All of those things were lost. And over time, as I've begun to trust my sexual drive again and trust myself not to get overwhelmed by it, I find a lot of those other things coming back. So it's the same thing. I care what people think about me. Certain people, the people I care about, I'm directing it. I'm not taking it and pretending it doesn't exist, because how can we pretend we don't care what people think about us? That means we don't care about connection. But who are the 5 or 10 people that you care about?
Right. And then I also care about whoever I'm talking to at the moment. So I've always, I have a fear of public speaking. I've led 1 minyan in my entire life. And it was my bar mitzvah minyan for Mariv. And this idea of getting up in front of a multitude of people. But if I can speak to one person, and then 2 people and 3 people, and I can gauge where their attention is at all times, and I could adapt what I'm like, I can tell when I'm saying something is falling on deaf ears, and I could adjust what I'm saying, because in the end of the day, if I'm an important idea is being communicated and somebody's not hearing it, whose fault is that, right? Like it's on me.
But what's interesting is we don't always know. I remember when you're familiar with the first step in recovery? You know what
The
it
first
is? The
step
first step?
is stop
Admitting to
drinking alcohol,
ourselves,
admitting to ourselves that we are an addict.
yeah, that we're powerless. But
Powerless, right?
in specific programs, especially programs related to sexual addictions, as part of the first step, as part of this admission, there's a public talk of sorts given in front of the group. So at some point in time, I came in, I got a sponsor, I got to know more people, I started working on the steps, and he said, okay, I want you to write your story and tell your story. And in that space, I share where I'm coming. I share my history. I share all of that. I share how my addiction progressed, and I share how I eventually made it to the meetings. And it's very emotional, or it could be very emotional. And for many of us, it's the first time we shared aspects or details of our story that we never shared with anyone else. To this day, there are aspects of my story that I haven't shared. It's not proper. It's not necessary. It's not decent for me to go into the gory details of my addiction, of my story. It's not. A lot of that's private. I share what needs to be shared, but in that setting, there's certain parts of the infection that we need to get out. Maybe there was something very shameful that someone went through. Maybe it was the frequency of porn. I remember one person talking about he watched porn for 40 hours straight. He was a programmer, and he's just like, from when he got off work on Friday till Monday morning, he was at his computer the whole time, and he left a few times to go to the bathroom, go to the fridge and eat, always coming back to his seat, and slept at his computer. And through all that, all he did was watch porn. And that was particularly shameful for him until work started again on Monday morning. For others, it may be the type of porn they viewed, whether it was gay porn or transsexual porn or some other porn. And that's the specific aspects of their shame. So having a meeting where amongst 10 or 15 close people, those details can be shared is so powerful, because then we can see people and a connection gets created. Anyway, the reason I went here is because there was something you said that triggered a memory where through my story, when I wrote it and I spent a lot of time with it on my sponsor, I used an expression that I didn't mean it literally. And the expression I used was at different points in my story when I wanted to highlight that this was something really important that I missed. I said something like, I prayed never to forget that. And then I said another one, I prayed never to forget that. And I was being ironic in my writing, saying I actually did forget it, and realizing now how important it was that I forgot that moment and I repeated that same thing. But I was saying, I prayed never to forget that. I prayed never to forget that. I said it 5 or 6 times in my story. And one guy says to me, after you speak, you go around the room and people share their thoughts, and it's a very healing moment, right, where we can put out some of our deepest, darkest secrets in specific detail, and then people can give their feedback and say, oh wow, that was so powerful for me, it brings me back to this moment in childhood, or when you said this is what it felt like for me. And one guy says to me, he says, Ellie, I don't know you very well, but what struck me about your story was the way that through it all, at your deepest moments, you prayed. That you were able to do that and have the presence of mind. And I did not believe in God at that moment. I did not mean that literally. Mm-hmm. And what I realized from that moment is we're just speaking, man. We are literally just speaking. And what someone is getting is exactly what they need to get, for good or for bad. It's their message for them. You have 100 people, 1,000 people listen to what we're saying here, and people will be left with completely different experiences. So if we can let that go, right, it's so freeing. Like, it freed me of, I'm going to put everything I have into it, but I'm going to know it's going to come from here. And what someone does with that, how am I supposed to know? Right. The way it touches someone, how am I supposed to know?
So for me, the realization I came to recently was that the person I have to please is myself. Meaning, when I write down an idea or a thought or a feeling that or I communicate it, especially now that I'm recording what I talk about, and I can listen back to what I said and how I said it, and when it sounds, that's not what I meant, that didn't capture it, I could say it better. I could say it so. It's me that I have to be able to look at it and say, oh, that's beautiful. And that's like, and have that like aha, like almost getting clarity from myself. I've been talking about and thinking about the connection between addicts and creative people, and how essentially the addict and the creative, and the people who are not just, everybody's an addict on a scale, in my opinion, right? Like
Right.
we all have our tendencies on a scale. We're all creative on a scale, but not everybody's a creative person. Not everybody's an addict. And I think they're the same people. And that's why, like, and this need to create, and it's the need to be okay with creating, and also a belief that, so I have a weird fear, like, and I recognize its weirdness, that if I were to become the best version of myself, if I were to fully shine, I would be more attractive, right? And when you're more attractive, meaning not just physically, just like you like somebody who walks into a room and they have confidence, there's a certain attractiveness. They draw people towards them, people come towards them, and it's like almost this distrust in myself. Like I forget which comedian says it. Everybody did a bit on, people get so upset about Tiger Woods sleeping with like all these supermodels, like, and judging him, and like like who are you, right? Like what do you think you would be like if you had a bus full of supermodels sitting outside your door? And like the idea Nietzsche presses is like, if you're moral because you're incapable or incompetent in some way, that's not morality. So it's almost this
Jordan
safety
Peterson says
mechanism.
this.
Jordan Peterson, in the
Here's
name of
one.
Nietzsche.
Right,
Yeah,
oh yeah. Oh no, he
yeah,
says like if you're violent and you create peace, that's meaningful. But if you can't create violence and you're peaceful,
yeah.
what
It's
is it?
it's a direct quote from
Okay,
Nietzsche.
good quote. Nice.
Nietzsche
Okay.
has some of the most incredible paragraphs that I wrote that I would love to, like, to just, they fit into this. And so there's
So
one that
say the direct quote again.
um, I'll give, it's a different direct quote, but whatever. This you need to be, if I'm only good, and I'm only a faithful husband, and I'm only a faithful, like, because I'm safe, like that's not really worth that much. Like, so it's like, let's see, like having a little trust in my ability to be great, and to be powerful, and to be creative, and to be attractive, and not hide myself. Like there's a certain, like, I don't know, even just talk, like there's a certain need to hide myself because I'm afraid, like I have a certain
But
belief
when
that
you're
if,
aware that there's unlimited levels to this, right?
yeah, what do you mean by that
Meaning
though?
you've already stepped out. You've already stepped out more than a lot of people, just by nature of a conversation like this.
Yeah, and yes, it's, this has been a process. I can step out more, you're saying?
You could step out more, right? For example, like in the last 2 months, I've stepped out more than I have at any point in my life. And last week, a guest came my way that made me nervous because I understood that this guest can throw me in to the fire a lot deeper than I am, in ways that I didn't feel in ways that I don't feel ready at the moment. I feel a little bit more ready today than I did a week ago, but there's unlimited levels to this.
What do you mean by the fire? So why is it like okay, what was it that made you feel that way? And then like what, I'm still trying to put my finger on what is the it that we're afraid of.
Right, we're constantly stretching in different ways, right? So it's just that growth and what happens when you do that. So, for example, when I was in yeshiva, I got a scooter. I'd started working, making a couple of bucks, and I had a scooter. The scooter cost me $150, but most kids, 19, didn't have $150. Maybe it was $400. Didn't have $150 or $400 that they can spend on a scooter. So, from the kids in school, I was the only one with a scooter. That made me uncomfortable in some way, because here I am, here's all my friends, and I'm the one with the scooter. Today would kind of like, a scooter made you uncomfortable, like this thing is side of the road. Today, give me a Ferrari and that may make me uncomfortable. And maybe it's not a Ferrari, maybe it's a $100 million house, maybe it's a private plane. There's unlimited levels to what that will do. In terms of the podcast itself, there was a time where I did mostly audio. There was a time where every time I spoke, I felt the need to invite a guest who had some form of name that I can piggyback behind, saying, you're not coming for me, you're coming for them. I never pretended to have anything. I'm just the one who put it together. I'm asking the questions that you all have. And then stepping out and saying, no, I have something to share. And then putting it in the form of audio and video. And then putting it in the form of hiring people who are going to help me with it. And then putting it in the form of getting a certain guests that are outside of a certain comfort zone. I have a comfort zone, right? I have a comfort zone within the Jewish community. I have a comfort zone within the healing community. Going beyond that. Right? Each one of these are forms of stretching. It's no different than lifting weights. Does 10 pounds scare you? No, but try 100 pounds.
Right.
It scares you.
Something Jordan points out is that the creative person, and I think we can switch the addict and the creative person with almost every single time he says the word, the creative type, because I posted a reel today of just a compilation of like, why would you ever, like, you wouldn't wish being creative on somebody. It's the most tormenting like thing in the world. Like, because if you're not creative and you're not pushing your boundaries, you're not expanding your horizons, you're not venturing into the unknown, and you're not doing those things, that actually you wither up and die if you're a creative person. Like he uses those words, like, and it was like I over the past few years I've been feeling that sense of like, I don't know, there's the depression of marriage, right? So like, because anytime you make any choice, you're mourning all of the infinite amount of choices you didn't make. Like, right? So you choose one woman, you literally like there's a mourning of all of the other women in your world, like a real mourning. There's a reason why Sheva Brachos and Shiva are both 7 days, and why we have a mitzvah to be b'sameach chatan v'kala, right? Like, and because why should we have to be sameach? Why should we have to make them happy? They're already happy. What do you mean? They're getting married, the best thing ever. And this realization that there is always a mourning.
Come from someone?
That comes from someone. That comes from the same person who told me to never let my wife know that I watch porn. Never
view of marriage.
Never let her find out. But by the way, that's the common view. There's a certain.
If you're stepping into a relationship where you can't be fully honest, I would mourn that too.
Yeah, and in a relationship, I got married at 20, and I got married. If I'm being honest, out of a place of I found a woman I loved. I tried to break up with her. I couldn't because I had no interest in dating for any other purpose other than marriage at that, like around that point. I realized like, and I'm not ready to get married. And I broke, we were on and off, right? But like I broke it, like we're done. And it came back to like, okay, I want to be with her. The only way I can be with her is marriage. It's not possible. Found out it's possible. We can make it work. We can get help. We're 20, whatever. And there was this for years, like, okay, so my wife was in school and I was just making some money. My in-laws were helping initially. There was too many strings attached. So I cut my in-laws off from helping. I went out to go get work. I have no skill sets. I have no like credentials or anything. So I had a job working for a friend in his vape shop and did everything for him and with him. And I learned every day, right? Like I learned Torah. Like I learned for 3 hours in the morning and I loved it. And I had a great day at the shop.
You guys are happily married today?
Happily married, still happily married, 2 kids. And we work, we talk, we like, and we're too similar for our own good in many ways. And as opposed to opposites attract, we're very similar in many ways that sometimes feeds into negative patterns between the two of us. But I knew I wanted the only area. School was never my thing, but I could do school if it was studying psychology and philosophy, right? Like that was my, like I could become a great psychologist and a great philosopher. I could do that. And I could imagine myself sacrificing day in and day out towards that aim because it's an aim that I desire. And I don't see anything else that I really desire as much as that was the idea at the time.
It's amazing to be that clear, yeah.
So there was a period of time where finally my wife was in school, she finished, I got my shot, right? And I got my shot because COVID happened. It stopped me from doing my work. Nothing was happening anyways. Okay, now I'll shoot my shot. Instead of waiting until I make $1 million and I can come back to school and afford school, let's just do it now. Started school, never thought I would get into the psychology program at Hebrew U. because it had to do a mechina, which was in Hebrew, and in Hebrew tests, like a preparatory program in order to get into the school. And you needed a 99 GPA to get into the psych program. I've never been more than a B plus student in my entire life ever. That was the peak. Like, and that was because I always figured out a way to do as little work as possible and get by. And I was an expert at that. But I got a 99 and I got into the program I wanted to get into. Got into the program. It was brutal. And then my body started to attack me, right? Like physically, like I got what's thought was Crohn's. It fistulized into like whatever, like really, really, really painful, to a point where like I had to stop school because I'm like, I can't do this. Like, it's literally, I'm beating myself up. I'm failing in school. I'm falling behind. I'm in so much pain. I'm so anxious. I just need to take a break. And the moment I took a break, I had this fear, if I take a break, I'm never going to be able to go back. I'm never going to be able to go back to school. And I was kind of right. My wife's anxieties about money kicked in again. And what are we going to do? And we have another baby on the way. And I'm like, all right, so I'll stop. I'll go get a sales job. I'll do sales. Kol hakavod. And in the last 4 weeks, I basically was this moment where my wife realized, and I realized, like, I had given up. Like, I'm not going back to school. Like, I'm going to figure out, I'll do my podcast. I'll figure out how to make it work. I had this moment where my wife realized, like, no, Mendel kind of has to do this. Like, and it's in our best interest, and it might take some time, but he has to do it. And the moment she came to me with that, and that clicked so much. And the moment she came to me with that, like, I realized how much I wanted it, how clear I've always been about it. And okay, so it's still difficult. And it's still difficult. And I knew that watching porn stopped me from, or watching TV excessively stopped me from taking the time it takes to create a plan, to just put out a vision, to write my thoughts down. It just stops it. It fills that void of, oh, I need to create, I need to do something. Instead of needing to create, I go to porn, or I go to Netflix, or I go to Instagram and scroll mindlessly. And Joey Rosenfeld again he was giving a friend of his just died of an overdose, and he gives a series to he gives a 12 steps, there's a 12-step program in Jerusalem, an AA institute, and he gives them, essentially, it's, instead of it being Torah with big book commentary, it's Torah's commentary on the big book, essentially. And he's like, he's always been like, the addict, like, it's good. It's like who you are. You're the best. You're the soul of Torah. And he got to this point where he's like, just like, he talking about how sobriety, the main thing is believing in one more moment of sobriety. And I'm like, what the heck does that mean? And like, what would it hit me? And I'm like, what do I have to be sober from? Like, cause it's not like, I have so many different things. Like, I have to be sober for my whole life. Like, everything, conversations are an escape. Weed is an escape. Alcohol is an escape. It's not escape. Those are all forms of connection. So some of them are detrimental and some of them are not detrimental. And he basically said,
why would you say they're disconnections?
So they know that they are So some of them are disconnections and some of them are connections. And so both disconnecting and connecting fill the void. So it's hard to tell whether or not I'm doing it because I'm disconnecting or I'm doing it because I'm connecting. Like, I could have a conversation that is just a drug for me, right? Like, it's like, I don't know, the need to be recognized, and like a voyeuristic
right,
showing of my greatness, or whatever,
or something else. Yeah,
it could be sick and perverted, and I could learn Torah, and it could be just me. Like, I'm not really dealing with a thing that needs to be dealt with. Like, I'm just doing that to turn away as opposed to look in. But he put it like this. He said, the ultimate goal is a sober life. He says sobriety is taking life seriously. But he was out of a point of frustration. He was speaking. He said, we have this top-down approach where the mind leads to the heart, which leads to action. He says, like, I need to understand my addiction. I need to know why it happens. I have to read Carl Jung, and I have to read the big book, and I have to know it. And once I can convince my mind of it, then that'll convince my heart, and that'll convince my actions. He said, but sometimes you don't have your mind and you don't have your heart. Like, so what the hell do I do when I don't feel like I have my mind and I don't feel like I have my heart? And and it was this moment that I stopped. Like when I was writing this and reading it, like, I just don't act. Like, just don't. Like, in the end of the day, the only thing you have to hold on to is this not acting, not engaging in the escape. And like, there was this, okay, I'm not going to do it in like 15 minutes. Like, in the moment I heard that, there's like, okay, the urge to escape, right? Like, okay, I'm just going to wait 5 minutes and then 10 minutes. And like, and I'm not going to do anything. I'm not going to go on my computer and do my work. I'm not going to go like watch Netflix. I'm not going to do anything other than I have a pencil in my hand and a paper in front of me. The only thing I'm allowed to do is write. That's it. Not to figure out whether or not I should write on my computer or I should record a video. Like, the only thing I'm allowed to do is write. And I've been doing microdoses of mushrooms for about 14 weeks now. I go to therapy in the mornings on Tuesdays, and it took me a while. Like, I just knew I needed to shift the way I was thinking. Like, something was wrong. Like, my perspective is just locked in the wrong place. And I've been doing this like for a number of weeks, and finally I found, like, this moment I realized, go to the forest, do your microdose of mushrooms after your therapy. You're going to sit in this bench, and you're not allowed to. Yes, but you can't write on a macrodose. It's just enough. So for me, it's like enough inebriation to lubricate and open my creative process.
Understood.
Like, as opposed to, like, I would like to go and do a serious trip, but I'd like to do that in a professional context the next time I do it, as opposed to just doing it.
I was kidding.
Yeah.
For myself, anytime I do experiences, just because we mentioned it, always with a guide, always plan before.
So I don't believe I need a guide. But I do, because I do believe I know the ingredients that go into, like, the set and the setting, and how that matters, like, more than anything. And my anxieties that pop up, right? And just writing down my anxieties that pop up. And I came to this awareness, like, I can be okay for 5 more minutes. I'm going to be okay. I'm going to be okay. I can handle this. I can handle sobriety.
Even if you don't do a guide, you definitely want someone. Until someone has a lot of experience, they definitely want someone nearby, even if it's in the room next door or standing 100 yards away if it's outdoors, that should the need arise,
yes,
there's another human being who's there.
I share
from experience. Because the goal is to get out of the mind. That's what you're trying to do. You're trying to get out of the mind. That's the purpose of a macrodose. If we can get out of the mind and get into somewhere else that's a little bit more free, what happens when we're out of our mind? What do our legs
what's wild is that is in our mind, nonetheless. Like, it isn't anywhere else but in our mind, all of that experience. Like, to me, that's one of the first time I ever did psychedelics. I was 17. It was right before I went to yeshiva for the first time. And I think of my cousin who was experienced. He's like, he gave me, like, my parents were out of town. We had a nice house. I set up one room for candle, like, with a peaceful, quiet room, and then we had it just set up the whole house. And I had 2 of my really good friends, my best friend and another friend. We're gonna do some serious dose of mushrooms together. And I remember, that single experience is the one thing that allowed me to realize that the way I perceive reality isn't necessarily the way reality is. And that single realization allowed.
But you didn't feel that was an experience more than a realization? Like, was it just in the mind? Because I experience it more. I felt it more like a full body experience. Like, if you're afraid, where are you afraid? Your heart is pounding, your stomach's in butterflies. If you're in love, where are you in love? Right? Your mind can't think, your appetite's suppressed. You can't sleep. You can't sleep. Your heart's pounding again. Butterflies in your stomach again. Right? So it's a full body experience. How do you know if you're in love? You didn't think it through.
Right. I guess we're missing each other on what we mean by mind. Like, I like, all experience is, to the degree of which there's conscious awareness of it. Like, that's your mind. I don't know. That's kind of what I mean. Like,
Okay.
Maybe I have to find a different phraseology.
Fine, But as long as we agree that it's not just in the domain of thought.
No, I know it. I experienced it as true. Like it's like
it's an experiential knowing.
Yeah, like Moshe Kibbutz Torah mi Sinai, right? Like not from God, from this experience of Sinai. Like this, like it was, yeah, like it's all encompassing experience, and it gave me a tremendous amount. What brought you? How did you find psychedelics, and like what brought you there?
Gabor Maté, straight Gabor Maté. I was an avid fan of Gabor's from when I was introduced to his book In the Realm of Hungry Ghost, Early Recovery. This is, say, about 2012, let's say, 2013. I come across his book, start reading some of his work. I really appreciated it. I found a way for it to completely dovetail with the 12 steps and also completely dovetail with Judaism. So there was a part of it that was beyond Gabor's own work, but he was a trusted guide, so to speak, in this forest of addiction. And by the way, one of my favorite definitions of addiction is from Shays Taub, where he says, an addict is someone for whom spirituality is a necessity rather than a luxury. So on some level, we can say that about every single person, but there are degrees of necessity. So, and it's a term I like personally, and before I go back to Gabor Maté, but personally, I don't like the term addict for any other reason, for any other purpose than to direct the healing. I am an addict, is that true? On a psychedelic experience, I am Eli is not true. Right there. So how can I be an addict? Right? As an example, right? There's awareness of I am. How can I be Eli, for example? How can you be Mendel if when you were born you didn't have that name? And I was born, I didn't have that name. Like, we're named at 8 days. So were you no one until then? So obviously I exist as someone without this name, just as you exist as someone without your name. So to say I am an addict, like, what does that mean? That I became an addict? Am I a farmer if I'm farming? So what the only purpose for it is to direct healing, because if I say I am an addict, I'm more likely to embark on a program of healing that other addicts participate in. You can call it the 12 steps, you can call it others. So just like with, I think it's with ADD, in order to diagnose it, they give certain medication and they see how the person reacts to it. And they say, oh, reacted, you have ADD. It didn't react, okay, you have something else. So meaning the title itself is not useful. It's only useful in order to direct the healing. So if someone's, for me, and the reason why it's important is I see so many people stuck, and you mentioned this at the beginning of the conversation, I'm not an addict, I'm not an escape artist. You're not anything. You're not an escape artist, you're not an addict, you're not any of those things. What you are is someone who's choosing to follow a certain modality of liberation. And if that one is one that many people who've called themselves addicts has used, God bless. Here's the hat, here's the t-shirt, sign up. I'm an addict, you're an addict. Let's do this together. I found liberation here. You can hopefully find liberation, and we'll call ourselves addicts all day long, but we're never going to become that. Anyway, back to Gabor Maté. So he was someone I followed. And one day on a podcast with Tim Ferriss, he's talking about, and I was anti-drug as it gets. If I heard someone was smoking weed, I didn't want to hire them. I didn't want to be involved with them. I was like, no, these people lost motivation. I had plenty of room for vices within the sexual realm, but very little in the mind-altering place. Not alcohol, not otherwise, very little alcohol. And I judge it heavily. But when I hear him talking to Tim Ferriss, and he says, ayahuasca is the number one healing tool or agent for addiction. I said, whoa, I got to pay attention to this. And what was so cool for me was how he had just encountered it a few years before. The way he says his story is that he started speaking about addiction after he wrote the book, and seminar after seminar, he's getting people asking him about ayahuasca. What do you know about ayahuasca? Have you ever tried ayahuasca? What do you think about ayahuasca? And he said to me, he's like, first I got so exasperated with it. Like, why are you talking about ayahuasca? I know nothing about ayahuasca. And then one day he's like, why do I know nothing about ayahuasca? If so many people ask me this question, if I'm going to be an expert in addiction, I may as well explore. And he did. And I have so much respect for someone in his 70s who was able to do that. So I did the same thing. And opinions of the yin yang. Go do it and watch your mind be blown open and your whole family start feeling better. Right? So when you experience, I'm not saying for everyone in that way, and that means just go to the side of the road for Peru, can have a comprehensive conversation. But for me, it was, I heard him say that, I trusted him, and I went.
And how did you go about finding a shaman or whoever, someone, like, how did you find the place? Did you go to Peru or did you do it in Miami?
I went to Costa Rica. How I went about finding it, just speaking to people, and then someone who I trusted said he had experience with this person, and that's how else, I didn't want to be the first to try, certainly. But, it's like once you know you want it, then it starts popping up all over the place. Like you start seeing it everywhere. So first you know one. And then after I heard Gabor Maté talk about it, then I was sure my wife would judge it pretty heavily, and it was one thought, okay, how am I going to have this conversation with her? And she tells me a story of some relatives of hers who were struggling in their marriage, and someone took him through an MDMA session, and it really helped them. So she's like, oh, wow, these relatives of her are doing better than ever. So I'm like, okay, so she's open. So that was, one block. And then, so to me, that was okay, two kind of messages about plant medicines. And then my wife and I go to France and for a weekend. And when you're there, when you're traveling, you're just kind of more open to meeting people. And a friend of mine says, hey, I have this apartment like a mile away from where you're staying. I have some friends staying there, but if you want to check it out and hang out with them, okay, fine. Like, yeah, what do we do? We're doing. We're in the south of France. I don't know anybody here. Yeah, I'll go over. I went over, and there was a couple who were on their honeymoon and with a bunch of their friends, and we kind of just joined, and we all knew this guy in common, although he wasn't there, but they were using his apartment. And in chatting, this guy talks about his struggle with sex addiction, although I don't think he used the term sex addiction, but just sexually promiscuous behaviors and how psychedelics healed him. I'm like, okay, this is three. This is three, like, I got it. Gabor Maté, my wife, honeymoon experience, and I came back 100% certain from that trip. I came back 100% certain that I'm doing this. This trip, I remember when I landed back from France, it was Erev Rosh Hashanah. When I came back from France. By Sukkot, I had the name of someone who does it. And the way that happened is I got a call from someone who I did not know well. And they said, Eli, I've never, I don't really share this part of my life with other people, but for whatever reason, I feel the need to tell you about it. My understanding now is that it came up for them on an experience. And if you're ever interested in experience, here's someone I work with, and they're a good resource in the space, either working with them or working with others. And so these things kind of lay it all out. And then from there, as I got to know, more people in that space, and the people I've worked with, it's always been from referrals. Someone who's worked with, had a good experience, I trusted them, and I don't know, we go.
And how do you relate with? I think it's a deeply, whether it's Chabad, I don't know where the dogma comes from, but it can't be Chabad because they use alcohol, but like that this any substance, like using, like you should be able to get there with your mind alone. Like you should be able to meditate your way there, or like how do you do you have that voice in your head? Did you have that voice in your head?
I had it. I should be able to do a lot of things, but the question is this: one person called it a shortcut. I said, okay, but I took a car here, right? You don't have a problem with that shortcut. And when I got sexually abused, was that a shortcut to screw me? When they made the internet and they made the algorithm so freaking easy to feed me porn, was that a shortcut to screw me? Why can't I use these? I don't understand the issue. Which part of my struggle do you want to give to me? The cheating, the addiction, the anxiety, the depression, the fear? what exactly do you want? Which part of my life would you give me back from before psychedelics? Which one would you like to stick on me in the name of whatever dogma you want to throw at me? So at this point in time, it was from experience itself, and then seeing so many other people find healing. And this is not a conversation around psychedelics, because it's such a powerful tool, and it needs. What I mean, it's not a conversation like it would take a couple of hours to really go into it. It's such a powerful tool. You want to use the term holy, and what I mean by that is the same way I mean sex is holy. There's so many things that look so similar, but they're so different. If I'm having sex with someone tonight, and I tell you, Mendel, I'm having sex tonight, but then I add two different things. One is I add with my wife, or I say with a prostitute. Those are not different. Those are opposites. Opposites, literally opposites. So if I tell you I'm having a mushroom experience this evening, what else about that, right? There are a few more details I can add that one can make it deeply healing, and another, for lack of a better word, just a desecration of some of the most beautiful things that exist. So I understand, like, where did it come from? It comes from all of us. It comes from all of us seeing these fires that exist in the world, and way too many people getting burnt by it. And they say, stay away from fire. But we can't stay away from fire. We can't. Even a kid sees fire, they got to touch it.
Especially the addict, who to that degree is still a kid. Like if you like that, I don't know if you're like the rebel, the curiosity and the rebel like attitude of I'm not the same as everybody else. And I had like I was very young when I realized that whenever you shouldn't smoke. I remember the first time I went out to go buy weed. Before I ever did, like I was on my way out the door, my mom sits me down and said, "If I ever catch you smoking weed, I'm going to put you in rehab." And I'm like, first off, is what's going on? How do you know that I'm about to go buy weed now? Like that's a little scary, but there's always this insistence. I wrote every single research paper in high school on I wrote 3 research papers in high school: medical marijuana, and then on regular marijuana, and on prostitution. Those are the three papers I wrote in high school. I believe like I was just blatantly myself, like, and there was a certain like game I was playing of like if I could be open about my pot smoking, all my friends' parents know it, all of my friends know, like the certain, and they still I'm the kid who sits and talks with my friends' parents for the extra hours after the meal when everybody else runs downstairs. Like that was always like, you could see me and I was like, I can use, not abuse. You drink alcohol, you watch TV, you go on vacation, you do all these things to escape. I'm never going to do it in order to escape. I actually like really consciously, I'm not like, if I'm feeling bad, I won't smoke weed. I'll only smoke weed for fun. So for me, the litmus test is, am I enhancing my reality or am I escaping from my reality? And it's very hard sometimes to make a distinction between the two. But like you said,
Well, maybe enhancing is a confusing word. If you said, if your focus is, and everything you're doing, you're disconnecting from one thing and connecting to something else, right? Like, just like you said about your wife, is marriage a connection or a disconnection? You said it. I'm connecting to my wife. I'm disconnecting from the rest of the world. I heard this from someone in Hebrew. The same 2 words come from the same root word. One is karov, which means to come close to something, and korban, which means to sacrifice something. To come close to one thing is to sacrifice something else. So the question is the focus on the connection to, or is it on the disconnection from?
Mm-hmm.
So when someone's doing a mushroom trip, is it, I'm not feeling great today, I want to disconnect from this, and I'm going to use psychedelic mushrooms to disconnect from my reality. So the focus is on disconnection.
It's the dumbest idea ever to choose mushrooms to disconnect, because you almost it's scary because you end up being faced with all your demons if you're trying to run away.
It could be, and it depends on the dosages. It could be, and it can't be. There are many people who use it recreationally. LSD, many people use it recreationally. There are certain ones like ayahuasca, I've never heard of anyone who uses it recreationally. Right. But the focus is on a connection. So you say, I'm looking to connect to myself better, to connect to the world better, to understand more, to know more, to experience more, that the focus is on the connection. And that's same thing, but that's a difference, right? Same idea. Sex with my wife, what is that about? It's about connection with her. Sex with a prostitute, what is it about? There's a reason it's a prostitute. It's someone who's like, it's not about her. It could be kind of connected to her, but the focus is on the disconnection from self. I want to escape myself. I want to escape my reality. So I'm going to go in that direction. And that may be an easier way, because just to use enhance is, so it's going to enhance. Of course, many things are going to enhance. Mushrooms are going to enhance your experience every day of the week. But if you say, am I driving towards connecting with something? When you married your wife, you didn't say, I'm disconnecting from the rest of the world. You said, I'm connecting. And maybe this is the same with asceticism. If you're going, what's the difference between isolation and meditation? One is I'm running away from everyone, and the other is I'm going into myself, connecting with it. What is the Hebrew word, kavana, right? What is the intention? What's the direction? Where are you pointing towards?
You're facing up, and always be facing up, and surround myself by people. I
say the same thing. Go ahead.
Yeah, just and doing my best to surround myself by people that like are okay with me facing up. Like there are people who include, and sometimes even the people closest to us who they're scared of you going up because they feel like they might get left behind because of their own issues.
100%. Spouses all the time are extremely nervous. My wife was very, very nervous. She'll tell you today, I'm not sharing the secret. She was very, very nervous when I began exploring psychedelics. And she kept saying, I'm afraid you're going to leave me. I'm afraid you're going to leave me. How right she was. There was only one difference. I invited her to come with me also. Right? Meaning I did. And I left myself also. The place I was in then is someone who is incompatible with the person I am now, which means the person I am now is incompatible with the person she was then.
And you think did you go through it separately before you went through it with her, or?
Yes.
And so yes. Did you, when you had gone through it, did you feel incompatible with her in that interim?
It created, immediately it created a very strong connection between us, because it was an understanding, it was a perspective shift. A lot of the things that she was frustrated with me about, I was able to recognize. And the first experience is she was like, wow, I love this version of you. But as it continued, there was she was nervous each time, but as it continued, it became very scary for her, and said, where's my husband going? And it became somewhat incompatible. It did. We were incompatible for a time. It put a tremendous amount of friction on our relationship. And then that was a choice for her. Does she want to join or not? Fortunately, she has. And now that she has, I see the same thing happening to her. There are relationships in her life, not people she's married to, but there are relationships in her life that people are going to have to make a choice. It doesn't have to be through psychedelics. It doesn't. I know people who are continuously growing without that breath work or deep meditation or a certain kind of learning, experiential learning, right? It's not just knowledge. And they're able to grow and expand in that way. But if someone is not on that path, it becomes very, very, very difficult. When I got into recovery, I cut off all of my friends. Some chose to hop on board, and then our relationship became even stronger, and some chose not to. And I give a very difficult time speaking to them.
So it's a very real fear. And my wife feels, where are you going? Well, I mean, not just with psychedelics, like this, like, I don't know, hopefully it's not just a manic episode, you know what I mean, of how good I'm doing this past month. But even within this past month, there was the highs and the lows. Like the other Thursday, this 3 days ago, last Thursday night, I had one of the greatest evenings of my life of feeling connected, shining. I went to a friend's party, and like it was a Fabrengen party combo type thing, And I remember I came home, and on my walk home, I sent my wife a voice note of how just like how awesome the night was. And I came home, she woke up, it was like 1 a.m, and she woke up and we were talking, and I just let her know how amazing the night was. And there was this immediate like response from her of like, okay, great. And then like she needed to share with me the sadness she felt that I didn't bring her there. And like, and to me, with my traumas, it almost like, why are you trying to pull me down? And I had the,
That's what you felt like.
that's what I felt like. And I had the worst, most intense like breakdown I've ever had. Like in one day, like that I've had ever, like rage, of anger, of insanity. I like grab my, it was in bed lying down. Like, you're not hearing me. I feel like I'm being gaslit. Like, do you not hear that I might feel it to be that way? Like that when you insist on letting me know how bad you're feeling right now, after I just told you how great of a night I have. So it was really intense. And then it was a release. And then the next night, Friday night, went out together, and I brought her with me to the same person's house, same kind of group of people. And like, I don't know, it was a crazy high and crazy low, and I didn't escape anywhere. I just felt all of it. And it was, I don't know, reflecting on what you said about your wife, that feeling of where are you going, it's a real fear because it makes sense.
For sure. And it's going to have to be tested, right? Because if this change in me, and that's what she's doing, and that's what my wife did to me, if she's going to come along for the ride, she has to know that I'm on the ride. I'm not going to get blown off by the next wind. I'm not going to get blown off by her mood or her comments or anything else. Mm-hmm. Because then what is there to join? There's no security in this. It's quite literally a manic episode. Right. What makes an episode manic? That it goes down. If someone's in a good mood perpetually, it's not a manic episode. The mania is that it's doing this, right? It's the
isn't it always doing that? You like, is there a state you feel like you've been in a place where there's like a lateral growth, like vertical growth?
I've literally used this analogy that in addiction, one of the hallmarks of it is the peaks are high and the valleys are low. So it's looking like this. And in recovery, we give up the peaks for the valleys. So it kind of looks more like this, like a steady state. My great moods are, let's say in terms of intensity level. A peak in addiction looks like on a scale of 10, can look like 8s and 10s regularly. I went out all night, I was partying, I was yelling, I was screaming, I was jumping, I was arms around people, whatever it is, right? This very intense, call it joyful experience. And sex, a very intense orgasmic experience. And then feeling this incredible low. Now I'm down in those numbers of 7, 8, 9, and 10. Whereas it doesn't mean good. Good is not the same as intensity. It doesn't mean joyful. It just means intensity. So that through the recovery process, it becomes more intensity. Start hitting 2s above and 2s below, right? So on my worst day, I don't look noticeably different than on my best day. I feel something different, but it's not this incredible dejection or this incredible elation. Imagine coming home to your kids and one day they see someone at this level and the next day at that level. Right. Either one of those may be okay with consistency, but they're not okay with the volatility. And that's what the healing and recovery process will bring. And the wife and those around you want to know, is this for real? Are you serious about this? You're about to drag me on this journey. Can you withstand a punch? Mm-hmm. And that's what she did. She threw something at you. I feel like shit. And you showed her it's a manic episode. Right. But then the next day you rebounded and said, okay, listen, I may go off for a day, but I'm right back on. And that's the process. And eventually it becomes a little bit tighter. And then once she knows, hey, this is solid, this guy's not standing on clouds, then she knows I can join him there. He's created a landing for me that I can stand on. There's something safe here. She's not going to want to. My wife waited 2 years before she joined me. She needed to know it was solid, and she needed for me to go through some of that, fitting on. It does different things to different people. Are you saying you're never going to work a day in your life again? Are you going to go running to Bali and to meditate all day? What does this mean? And it's changed, right? The way I communicate now and the things I do and the way I spend a lot of my time is heavily influenced by my journeys, for sure. But there's a certain stability within that she felt comfortable with and said, okay, I can join him. I see where this is going. I'm clear on the picture he's painting.
Right.
But that took a couple of years, and there was a lot of fear and tests in the process.
And being able to communicate the picture you're painting, like to paint a picture beautiful enough that she could recognize it too. Like Eza derech hayashar she'adam sheyavor shetiferes be'einav and tiferes be'einei shel ha'ish. Like what is the straight path that a man should go on? Is that which is beautiful in his eyes and in the eyes of the other. And to be like it's like that need to communicate a beautiful vision of where it's going, like and one that she can sign up for, because that's up to me. And so to the degree of which
I think this is what it means.
Yeah.
I think it's what it means for a man to lead the woman. For like when the man is like playing that role of the masculine and leading a woman, this is what it is. But I need to know that your journey has stability. For women, it's very important. There has to be stability, be security for themselves, for their kids. They can't have the ups and downs. They can't withstand it.
It's making me
and
think of
right. If someone has to take care of a 6-month-old, they cannot.
Right.
Why it would be completely irresponsible to live a teenage life.
Another good Nietzsche quote that I think will put a lot of this in perspective. What if pleasure and displeasure were so tied together that whoever wanted to have as much as possible, one must have as much as possible of the other? That whoever wanted to learn to jubilate to the heavens would also have to be prepared for depression unto death. And then DeButton comments on it, another philosopher, the most fulfilling human projects appeared inseparable from a degree of torment, the source of our greatest joys lying awkwardly close to those of our greatest pains. We suffer because we cannot spontaneously master the ingredients of fulfillment.
Amen. Yeah, I think it's very, very much what we're saying. So, all right, keep thinking aloud.
Thank you for joining. A really big honor. I admire what you're doing. Keep doing it.
Likewise. I'm sure we'll do it again.